So, let's talk about journalism in Nigeria. Because telling the truth there, it's not just a job, it's this incredible high stakes balancing act. A dangerous tightrope walk, really. I want you to really picture this. You're walking a tightrope. On one side, your duty to report the truth, right? To hold up a mirror to this incredibly diverse society. But on the other side, there's the very real risk of causing actual harm. And that's no exaggeration. That's the daily reality for journalists in Nigeria trying to navigate this landscape of complex ethnic, religious, and social lines.
And this quote, it just nails it. It gets right to the heart of the problem. You know, how do you give someone visibility without exploiting them? How do you fight for a cause, for advocacy, without completely abandoning the objectivity that makes people trust you in the first place? That's the tightrope. And you have to ask, how do you walk that line? Because a misstep here, it's not just, a my bad correction in the next day's paper. We're talking about someone losing their job, their home, maybe even their life. So yeah, how do they actually do it?
Okay, so let's start at the ground level. We're going to look at the immediate human dilemmas that reporters are up against when they're covering communities on the margins. All right, this is a great way to think about it. Our source calls this the triad of ethical risk. So it's not just one giant, messy problem, it's actually three interconnected traps. You've got stereotyping, the easy but harmful story, then there's the absolute duty to protect your sources, and finally, you're dealing with hostile laws and social pressure. Let's dig into each of these. So, that first one, stereotyping. The thing is, the easiest story to tell is usually the one everyone's already heard, right? This is what leads to what's called the single story. It's where, say, an LGBTQ plus person is only ever framed by their sexuality, never as a doctor or a parent or a friend. It just flattens them, It strips away all their complexity, their humanity. Okay, next up is safety, and this is where the idea of informed consent gets, really complicated. It's not just about getting someone to say, yes, you can quote me. A journalist has to make sure their source truly gets all the possible fallout. We're talking about a real power imbalance here. A reporter can look like a ticket to help or visibility, so someone might agree to go on the record without fully grasping the danger they're putting themselves in.
And look, this makes the stakes crystal clear. This is not a what-if scenario. Under a law like the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act, just naming your source, if they're from the LGBTQ plus community, could literally get them killed or thrown in jail. A journalist's decision, it can have fatal consequences, period.
So you see the binds they're in, right? It's this constant, agonizing choice. On one hand, anonymity. It keeps your source safe, but your story might feel weaker, less credible. On the other hand, authenticity. Having a brave person put their name to their story, that has a huge impact, but it puts a target on their back. There's just no easy answer. It's a brutal calculation. But it's not all on the individual reporter's shoulders. These ethical problems go way bigger. So let's zoom out for a second and look at the whole system. Let's follow the money and ask who is actually paying for the news we get. And this is where we hit a really interesting paradox. We all kind of get that when a politician or a corporation buys a media outlet, it's about controlling the story. But what about when an activist group or an NGO, the quote-unquote good guys, pay for airtime to challenge the official story? Is that different? Is that okay? And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? When an NGO pays for a special investigation into, say, election fraud, and it looks and sounds exactly like a regular news report, is it public service or is it just really sophisticated PR? If you, the audience, can't tell the difference, then trust in all journalism starts to fall apart. And the hidden costs of these good intentions are huge. Just think about it. What if a local radio station relies so much on funding from an anti-corruption group that it's afraid to investigate that same group if a scandal hits? Or what if donor priorities mean everyone's covering issue A, while a massive local health crisis, issue B, gets totally ignored because there's no money in it? What you end up with is a media landscape shaped by what funders want, not by what the public actually needs to know. Okay, so we've laid out some pretty big challenges here, right? Both for the individual reporter and for the system as a whole. So what's the solution? Is there a path forward? Well, our sources say yes, and it involves a big shift in mindset, moving away from just reporting the facts and towards telling a deeper, more complete truth. And here's a framework for what that looks like. First off, collaborate with communities. Treat them like partners, not just subjects you're studying. Second, focus on solutions. Don't just report on the trauma, report on the resilience. Third, and this is a big one, radical transparency. Be upfront about who's paying the bills.
And finally, and this is for the funders, invest in actual newsrooms, not just in buying ad space for your own PR.
So, what's the point of all this? The goal is to get to a higher form of journalism. It's not enough to just say, this happened. The real job is to explain why it happened, to show all the messy, interconnected pieces of the puzzle so that we, the audience, can actually get the context we need to make sense of the world.
And this line from our source just says it all. This is the difference between propaganda and public service, right? Because as soon as the media is just serving its funder's agenda, and it doesn't matter if that funder is a politician or a well-meaning NGO, it stops being journalism and starts being propaganda. Public service has to be independent.
And I think this is a really powerful way to wrap our heads around this. For a long time, we've heard this phrase, giving a voice to the voiceless. And it sounds noble, but when you think about it, it's a little condescending, isn't it? The real shift, the better idea, is to stop trying to give people a voice and instead just pass them the microphone. It's about empowerment, about letting people tell their own stories in their own words.
Which brings us right back to the beginning. Journalism is supposed to be a mirror, reflecting society back at itself. But in today's world, a world that is just flooded with information, with paid content, with competing stories, who makes sure that reflection is actually true? Who guards the mirror? That's really the question at the very heart of this entire conversation.